the Dev Talk Show, and I'm Andy Schwam. Great to be here with everybody tonight. I've got Chris Gomez is here, and he's probably looking in the other direction. He is working on the controls and trying to get everything up to speed. You may notice another face on the stream here tonight. We've got our friend Brian Minisi here with us tonight. Brian is a solution architect for Nudesic. He's also a Microsoft MVP. He organizes some local user groups in the Philly area, including Philly Azure, and you can check that out on Meetup. And he is also an organizer of Tech Bash, which most people know that I am an organizer of Tech Bash. And so we're all friends, and we've known Brian for quite a while. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, look at that. IAC with Bicep and ARM.
Yes. Now we already talked about Tech Bash.
So, all right.
It's October 19th to the 22nd.
Hey,
it looks like it's happening. It's a very cool conference to go to.
It is a cool conference to go to. I would recommend it as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I took a picture of my arm for this.
Nice.
ARM templates.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, exactly. So just to give you a little bit of an overview, it is a domain-specific language. And what I like about it, it's a declarative way of writing ARM templates because it actually takes a lot of the abstraction away from writing these things. I mean, you still have to understand Azure and how resources work and the things that it takes in order to create a resource, such as a name of the resource, a hosting plan for, let's say, an app service. I mean, you have to know how to do all of those things. But it's a lot easier to write because if you looked at an ARM template and the JSON, it's very busy looking. It's very intimidating because there's just a lot of stuff in there. So it's good to understand Azure. But even if you don't understand Azure, I mean, it's still fairly easy to work with Bicep because, for example, in Visual Studio Code, you have a Bicep extension, which gives you tremendous, great IntelliSense to do this stuff, and that's something that we never had before. And the other thing about it is it compiles down to a regular ARM template, a JSON file. So you can deploy it in exactly the same way that you have deployed your ARM templates in the past. It gives you the ability to actually write it in a nice Python type of language and actually get compile time feedback and development time feedback on whether or not you're writing it the right way. You know, with JSON files, you don't know until you try to deploy it, whether it's going to work or not.
I've always found that's one of the big pain points. I've done a fair amount of work with ARM, and I just find it's painful, I think, right, Brian? Like, it's just like, I don't know if I'm doing it right, and it's just not a great experience, right? The outcome is a great outcome, right?
Yep, absolutely. And you do get squiggly lines in the JSON, but there are a lot of squiggly lines all over the place, so it's not a really good indicator of whether there's a syntax problem or not.
Right.
So some of the goals of Bicep, of course, is to abstract a lot of that detail of the underlying platform. And to make it easier for people to actually create these things. I mean, people that use Terraform, one of the things they love about Terraform is that it's pretty easy to write. So this does the same thing. It gives it that level of ease that you get with that you're used to with Terraform. You also can modularize it too. So if you have a lot of different granular Bicep files or ARM templates, you can actually reuse it using modules. So that's another great thing about it. So it's really it's a very cool language. And
I've tried to do modularization with my ARM templates, where we had like a library, and you could sort of pick and choose and then compose other ARM templates out of the segments of ARM templates, right? But even that was a little complicated as well, I think, a little bit. But is that something, have you done a lot with modularizing personally?
Yeah, so you have these nested templates, so it's like a deployment resource that you have to write. You got to pass in the parameters within that resource, and then you have to, when on your underlying templates, you still have to point to all these things, and it's a lot more difficult. But with Bicep, it makes it pretty easy. But then when you compile it to a JSON file, it makes it, you see the complexity in it.
Yeah.
So let's, the current version is version 0.31. This is now a production version, which is exciting because Bicep came out about a year ago, and it was an experimental language for all of this time. And I think it was last week or the week before it actually came out in production. So this is good timing to have this talk because we can actually talk about the production version.
That is good news. I did not know it was in production. I do find it interesting that we have a production software at 0.3.
Yeah.
And whatever happened to the days of 1.0 meaning something,
Yeah, you don't want to run out of numbers, though. So one of the things it has now is native support for PowerShell and AZ CLI. And one of the more important things is it's covered by Azure support plans now.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. So there are still some limitations that exist, but they're minimal. I mean, copy property is not currently supported. At least that's what it says on their website now. Single line object and arrays are not supported. But those things are going to come, and
Yeah.
there will be support for all the things that are currently limitations.
Okay. So you said something interesting a minute ago that I think I heard you say it compiles to JSON. Does that mean the output of this is the ARM template?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So it allows you to actually use the same pipelines that you used before to deploy the infrastructure. It's just during your build stage of a pipeline, you now compile just like you compile any code.
Okay.
So if it fails the build, and it will create an artifact that's a JSON file, an ARM template. And then in your deployment stages, you just call the ARM template using a resource manager.
Yeah, that's one of the things I think is really cool about this is that it doesn't break your existing pipelines, right? Like everything you have, you still get to keep. You still get to use all the stuff that you've made an investment in those pipelines. It's just the pain point of the ARM template itself is, sort of, whether you want to call it syntactic sugar or, whatever. It's kind of like TypeScript is to JavaScript. I mean, maybe that's a stretch, but Bicep is to ARM. Like,
right.
TypeScript runs as JavaScript. Like, it becomes JavaScript. This becomes ARM, but you get the goodness at design time.
Right. It feels like you're actually developing in a real language.
That's cool.
Which is very cool.
Yeah, I'll admit I was not, I have not been thrilled with ARM templates because I tend to find myself, I'll generate them in the portal or something, and then I have a really hard time figuring out what to change. And then let's say I get away from it for a few weeks. I come back and look at it and I go, what is this doing? So I'm excited to see how this is going to feel a little bit more like the declaration of what I want instead of the parameters listed out in unrelenting JSON.
Right. And the learning curve for ARM templates is very long.
Yeah.
It's a very long learning curve. Probably 2 years ago, it would have taken me maybe 4 months to write a complex ARM template deployment, where 2 years later, it'd probably take me 30 minutes because I went through that learning curve.
Okay.
But with Bicep, you can cut that down to even less time.
Okay, cool. That's
I can't wait to see that.
Yeah, definitely far less code that you have to write.
That's a great comment in the chat. Ross Lip says the documentation for ARM is very weak, and he says pun intended, right? So very weak arm right there. You got to build up your biceps, though. That's the whole catch here, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, there's on GitHub, there's a Bicep repo within the Azure org. And this is where all the development is happening for Bicep. And you can see down in the language section. Can everybody see that? Should I make it a little bigger, or is it good?
Probably close, some Control Plus in the web browser here would be very helpful.
How's that? Better?
Yeah, that's probably better.
Yeah, that helps a lot.
Okay. So looking at the languages, it's 97.1% C#. So that's what Bicep was written in, was primarily C#.
Okay.
Which is very interesting. So in here, you have some documentation on what it is, and basically some of the things I just talked about. What are the goals and non-goals? And it's actually really simple. The syntax of it can't be easier. And it tells you how to go about getting it set up on your system. So you basically. So
this is something we need to install. Like, this is not coming in the box or something like that, right?
Right. Exactly. So with the VS Code extension, you just have to install it as an extension of VS Code. And let's see.
I like that logo, by the way. That's a slick logo.
Yeah, I like it too.
That's cool.
And since it now works with AZ CLI, you can install it just by doing a command AZ bicep install. But you have to have AZ CLI 2.20 or later, which I think 2.20 is the current version of AZ CLI.
Okay.
And then you can upgrade it by just doing the upgrade, or you can actually install a specific version. But I don't know why anybody would want to go back to an experimental language version when 0.3 is out now. So it definitely is easy to install. The only thing you have to do is add it to your environment variables to the path. The install doesn't do that for you. But once you do that, you can run it in a command line, command prompt, and do all the fun things you need to do with it. Or you can manually install it if you want.
I'll pass.
Yeah, I would too. So let's take a look at some of the commands for this before we get into some actual demos. So we have.
Is this browser window still zoomed? This one seems smaller.
No,
I don't know if it's,
I'll do this to 200.
Okay, yeah, that's nice. Thanks.
All right, so these are all the commands, which are not a lot, so it's easy to learn. You have a build command, which builds the Bicep file into a JSON file. One thing that's really cool is this decompile. What you can do with this is you can point it to an existing ARM template, and it will generate the Bicep file for you based on that ARM template. So if you want to start converting things over to Bicep and you put a lot of investment into ARM templates, rather than going and having to write it all over again from scratch, you could just decompile it. Because like I said, what this Bicep gives you the ability to do is compile time, response to if it will work or not. So it's like regular code. You have the install for AZ and the upgrade, list versions, but that's about it.
So it really sounds like, what do you need to know? You need to know build, decompile, right? Like that's kind of it, I think.
Yeah, and really build for the most part because it's a one-time thing most likely. Once you do the install, you don't need that anymore. So it is very, very easy. So I don't know if anybody's interested in seeing this in action.
I am definitely excited to see this in action.
All right, let's go over to here. And let me know if this is big enough for you. It's giant for me. It looks really big.
Really?
Yeah. So in here, I have a Bicep folder with a main.bicep file in it. So the file has to be .bicep. It has to have that extension for it to work. And you just start writing as you would normally write a language. So one of the first things you need, of course, are if you have any background in ARM templates, you have parameters because you need to be able to pass in values to the ARM template. So one of the things you would do is, of course, I'm going to create a app service plan and an app service.
Okay.
So one of the things
and
we
for those
need,
people that are new to Azure in particular, right? An app service is basically like how you would run a web app, right? And an app service plan is sort of defines the, I know it's all supposed to be serverless and stuff, but the app server plan defines the sort of like the hardware, right? Like the the amount of processor you're going to have, and whatever, like that kind of basic stuff, right?
Right.
You need to have
and the price, and the price,
and what you're going to pay.
Price. Yeah,
exactly.
Good point.
Okay, so you see we have IntelliSense here. So
that's just
very
that's
cool.
Just great.
So something else that we'll need is a hosting plan name. And that will also be a string. Okay. So other things that we're going to need is that SKU, which determines for the hosting plan what type of hardware you're going to use, what the price is going to be. So I'm going to create another param for that, which we'll call it a SKU name.
So that's where you put in like your B1 or whatever that is, right? Whatever your
And here I'm going to default it to an S1.
Ah, okay. So simply adding default value, right? Like this looks simple. Like again, it's holding up to the promise that you've sort of stated that this is going. I know what it means to do these things in ARM templates, and there's a lot of curly braces all over the place. Like this is straight up simple, right?
Yeah, a lot of copying and pasting that you would do too, because it wants to write that stuff.
Right.
So let's do tags, for example. Oops.
Oh yeah, I'm a big fan of tags, actually. Yeah.
Yes, that gives you the IntelliSense. So it's called Bicep. Let's see, what is it? Everybody can see what I have installed here. So it's Bicep.
There it is, Bicep. Yeah. Now, just out of curiosity, do you know if they have any kind of tooling inside of Visual Studio, the larger Visual Studio product?
That I don't know, because I really don't use Visual Studio anymore.
Gotcha.
There may be, but since this is a scripting language, I would much prefer using Visual Studio Code for this. Let's see. All right, so for tags, we'll do create a date, which will be when? Today? So what is the date? 3/10.
10.
20.
You know what today is, Chris? I bet Chris knows what today is. Yes. That's what I was thinking. I've seen that on Twitter because it's like MAR 10, right? So you say Happy Mar 10, Happy Mario Day. I guess it's cute. Well, you're the resident gamer, so I figure, you're hip with all the gaming stuff. I just saw it today too for the first time, and I thought it was funny. Oh, Chris, you're muted. They're saying you are muted.
We're going to see 314,
Chris said some
right?
really great stuff right there. It's
He
just
did.
a shame. Chris threw out some pearls of wisdom
that changed the world if you heard it.
We have not heard before on this show, and it's just a shame. But everybody missed it. We were joking around about this Mario Day. Mar 10 is Mario, right? We said it. It wasn't that funny the first time, so
it has to be funnier the second time.
Yeah, right. All right. So sorry, I interrupted you.
All right. So look, we have our params that we'll need for this. So now we have to actually create our resources. So there's a resource keyword that you can use, and we want to give it a name because we might want to refer to this resource later on in our ARM template. So we want to give it a name, and that name will be what we would use later on. So we'll just call it service plan because this is actually going to be for the app service plan. So we got to tell it what type of resource this is. And guess what just came up?
Yeah, that's nice right there.
Amazing IntelliSense. So I'm going to say web app service. Oh, that's not it. What would it be? Service
right?
line. Service.
Okay.
I think it's like, isn't it like web dot service? But there you go.
Well,
That's it.
But all I have to do is type in. So this is another cool
Microsoft.
thing. I didn't have to start it from the beginning, like Microsoft dot. I just typed web / and it was still able to pick up all of the.
So you could have just done server farm right off the bat, you know, like I guess. One of the things, by the way, that kills me about this stuff, whether it be ARM template or this, I have to throw out a little bit of a complaint here. They call them service plans or app service plans, but yet here they're called server farms. And I think there's a few instances of things like that where the naming is not really consistent. It's like, why not call it a server farm, or why not call it an app service plan? This is not necessarily a Bicep complaint. This is about, I think, ARM in general. You know. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, naming is pretty easy, right, Andy?
Yeah, sure. Maybe's great. We love Maybe, don't we?
Naming is pretty easy.
Oh,
right?
naming. Oh, yeah, naming is easy. We had a whole show about that, didn't we? I think we've probably done shows about that. Naming's rough.
Yeah.
So, all right.
So guess what? We have IntelliSense too, saying, "Hey, we're expecting something else here." We wouldn't get that in an ARM template necessarily. So we're going to basically just build this out. So what a hosting plan needs is a name. So it shows that up, and it also shows our parameters. So this is going to be hosting plan name.
Oh, it shows your built-in parameters up above.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's nice.
And we still have a squiggly here saying we still need to add some more things, and it tells you exactly what you're missing. So the other thing we need is a location. And for this, we're just going to use the resource group location. So whatever resource group we are pushing this to, we're going to get the location for that. So we have resource group, and then we can type location. So we still have more IntelliSense here.
That's a lot easier. Now you haven't defined the resource group yet, right? But
no,
it knows it will be in a resource group when you deploy it, right?
Right. And remember where we specify the resource group. That's in the PowerShell command to deploy the ARM template.
Yep.
So we don't necessarily need it here. We'll just need it when we're going to deploy. All right. So we need to specify a SKU also. And this is our S1, basically what the hardware is going to be and what the price is going to be. So we have name, and it gives us our IntelliSense for SKU name. So we have that, and we're just going to put tags in here. And we'll just do this. Okay.
So tags, you just refer to the object. You didn't even have to specify like one or which tag or anything like that. Just you want both of them, and that's it.
Yep, we can create them here and just specify the object name.
Right. Now, for people who know, Azure resources, right? Tags are just key value pair sort of thing that you would just use to attributes that you can apply to your resources in there. I find them really helpful, to do things like owner, as a matter of fact, and things like that. So that's common stuff. But
yeah, and they're arbitrary too, right, Andy? Like you can do any key value pair you want. So it's like grabbing a sticky note and writing anything you want it and putting it on the resource.
Yeah, the other thing is like in enterprises, they want to know what group this resource is for, what the billing identifier is so they can charge back, all the information you would hold in a tag for that resource.
Yeah, and keeping track of things in Azure Azure governance and all this kind of stuff is really gets complicated when you have, large subscriptions. And so anybody who's watching or listening, if you're using Azure and you haven't started using tags, look into that, because there's just a really big value you get from that. I find them really helpful.
Definitely. Definitely. All right. So look, we have the app service plan here now. So the next thing we have to do is actually create the web app, the app service. So once again, we'll use the resource keyword and we'll name this website. And now we'll take a look at what we can find in here for websites. So we'll do web, we'll do sites, and here we go.
I assume you would always take the top, most recent, I guess the current definition.
I would.
Is there any reason why we wouldn't? I try to wonder about that. Like, was there any reason why we would not?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I have no, because it's not as though they're breaking changes in the new versions that I've ever found. It's just added features in the new version.
Okay.
All right, so let's do the same thing we did up there. Let's specify what this is going to look like. So
and you got the squiggles right there.
Yeah, we have that squiggle right there, and it tells you what we're missing. So we have name, and we're going to use site name, which is our parameter at the top. And we are going to now do a location, just like we did before. There's group.location. And then finally, we're going to have properties here. And we could add tags to this too, but the property is what app service plan is this going to belong to? And that's where this name up here is going to come into play. So we're going to say properties. And we're going to say server farm ID. And here we're going to say service plan. So we're going to specify what's up here.
That's it?
Service plan dot, and then we have all the things that we can find within here. So we want the ID.
Now that right there, if anybody's ever worked in ARM templates, I mean, to me, right, unless I'm mixing it up with something else, like that there alone is like worth the price of admission, I think, right? Because getting the IDs of resources is kind of a pain in the neck, isn't it?
Oh, in ARM templates? Oh yeah, it's like this long string that you have to reference, and you always have to look it up and see what that's going to be. And sometimes you have to run commands on an existing resource in order to find it. So it's definitely easier to do something like this.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah. So we have our Bicep file for creating an app service.
So that's it? That's the whole thing?
Yeah, with an app service plan. So how do we actually compile this? Well, it's easy. So once you have everything installed locally, you just have to type in Bicep build.
Build, right? Your build. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
That was one command.
Yeah, and then the name of the Bicep file.
Okay.
So that's about it. And if it works, it's going to create a JSON file that we're used to seeing.
If it works?
Well, this is a demo. Things never work all the time in a demo, at least not for me. All right, so this is the JSON file it created.
Yeah.
Now, we have our parameters here. We have all the schema stuff up here. We have our parameters. We have a lot of noise and a lot of tags and lines and things.
55 lines.
55 lines, where our Bicep file is 24.
And
so
well, I was going to say, and it seems to have stuck to what we care about.
Yep. So one of the things you want to look at here are, for example, the server farm ID.
That's what I was talking.
This is what you would have to do.
Right.
You would have to write if you were doing it in an ARM template.
Yeah.
All of this stuff. So that's not fun. And also, it takes care of the depends on for you.
I was going to just ask that. So you're saying it knows that just it knows to do that, right? Because
Yeah.
if something references something else, it must have to do it first, I guess, right?
Yes, exactly. So the fact that we did this in here, server farm ID is equal to this, it automatically knew it had a dependency.
Oh, that's nice.
So it added it for us. So a lot.
And so for, well, sorry, just for people that might not know what the depends on word there in an ARM template, it's basically saying I have to create some resources first in order for them to be available for the next resource to use, right? This resource depends on another resource.
Right. And it doesn't matter what order you necessarily have it written in. Just as long as it depends on or correct, it will follow the path that you specified in the depends on. So that's pretty simple, right?
Yeah. I was going to say, I think this dovetails into a question that we got from Open Window 365, because I think we're kind of getting to it, is ARM templates with linked templates have to be stored on a repo or blob storage to deploy through the CI/CD process. Is that still the same when using Bicep? And I think what we're kind of saying is Bicep produces these, so I'll let you answer it.
Yeah, so we're talking about linked templates. So that's the modularization thing that we were talking about. So let's take a look at what that would look like here. I'm going to get rid of this. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to paste it in here. And I'll rename it. So we'll just call it, Web app.
Sure.
So let's call it web app.bicep. So what this contains is, something that would be a linked template, for example, one of our JSON files, one of our granular ones that we want to compose into a much bigger, combining a lot of linked templates possibly. So here, let's get rid of all of this. And show how to write using this as a modular type of approach, where we're going to be pointing to this. So when we're talking about modular, we have to specify a target scope. And when we're talking about target scopes, we have some choices here. We have management group, resource group, subscription, and tenant. So in this case, we're going to do it at a subscription level, because I'm going to show you how we can actually create the resource group when we do this, instead of having it created for us. So I'm going to specify subscription as the target scope. And the next thing I'm going to do is create the resource group. So we'll call it RG, and we'll take a look at this as being what? Resources/resource group, I think is what we're calling it.
Resource
and
groups.
There we go. I think this is it, all right? So this is the most recent one. So this is our resource group. And what I'm going to do now is specify what we need for it. So one of the things we need is a name. And here, I'm just going to type in.
Cool.
Here.
Good name.
Yeah. And we still have a squiggly. So that means we probably need more stuff. I think it also has to do with this nonsense I have here. Okay, location, and here we're just going to say East US.
Okay. Does it give you IntelliSense on those regions?
No, it does not. For location, I don't think it does.
Doesn't seem like it. Okay, I was just curious.
That would be nice. Maybe that will be in a future release. So all of our squigglies have now disappeared. And what this is going to do is create a resource group. So we still have to point this to a template that we want to link to. So there's another keyword that's called module. And we need to give this a name just like we gave all of the other ones. a name. So we'll just call it module web app mod, and we'll specify, it automatically through IntelliSense knows everything that's within the folders.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So we don't have to do anything else there other than that, but then we still have to do our definition here. So one of the things that we need is a name, we need params, and we need scope. So the params are the things, of course, that we're going to be passing into the link template. But the name is something that is a little bit confusing here. This name is the name of the deployment that you're going to do. So it's a little bit of the details leaking through the abstraction layer that you have to tell it. If you actually look at a deployment in Azure that's running, it has a deployment name. So let's just call it app deploy. And let's do params. And our params are just going to be the things that we don't have values for, such as site name, and we'll just call this talk show app, and the hosting plan. IntelliSense already knows what's in that other linked resource, that linked template. So here we're just going to, let me see here, hosting plan. Where did this thing come from? Okay. So here we're going to have another little squiggly thingy, and we're going to tell it, wait a minute, hold on a second. This is a string. Getting a little confused here. And here we're just going to tell it, let's just do the same name. Dev talk show plan. So this looks right, but we still have a lot of squigglies here, don't we? So one of the things we have to do here is tell it what the scope is. What is the scope of this template that we're calling? Because right now we're at a subscription scope, but our template is not at a subscription scope. So we'll have to tell it what it is. And we can do this by just saying resource group, and then give the name of this. So rg dot name. So what this is telling us is that the scope of our link template is going to be this resource group. So we specified the name of that resource group here.
Okay. So does that fulfill the properties within the linked thing where it looks for something like resource group.name or resource group.location and things like that, right? Is that how that connects?
Yep, exactly. So this is telling us that this is going to be our talk show, the name of our resource group, and it's going to be in this region. So that's where the resource group.location would come in our link template. Okay, so we have this now, and you can imagine that if we have a lot of things going on here and we have a lot of modules, we'll just build them out and keep adding them here as needed. Because in a lot of enterprises, they have, at least the ones that I've worked at, I've always created a library of ARM templates for them that they can pick and choose what they want to deploy, because in a lot of places, they don't let the development team create the resources. It might be part of an IT group or a cloud services group. So you want to create a library of these things so you don't have to write them every single time, and pick and choose what you want to deploy. So that's where this modularization comes into play very nicely.
That does seem pretty nice. Now, if I look back at the question, Open Window 365 was asking, and I recognize this concept because I've done some of this with ARM templates. With ARM templates, when they're linked, they often, you have to sort of they have to be out in some Azure storage Azure Blob Storage or something like that, and you give the URL to the blob storage where you want to reference the component from, right?
Yeah.
In this case, the component is right next to it. But what if that component was in some sort of shared library? Like, how would that work, right? Like, I don't want to write webapp.bicep. I want to be able to pull that in from some.
Yeah, I probably would say we wouldn't do it that way now, since we have Bicep, because this is source code, and all of our templates should be within our repo, or at least should be assembled within our repo.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way I would approach it, just like you would do with any development that you would do for Angular or .NET Core or any of the other types of stacks. So I would say that this should be the approach you would take with it. So let's take a look at what this would look like, though, when we compile it.
Yeah.
So we're going to do just the same bicep build, main.bicep. So we're just going to create this one. And it created a JSON file for us again. And let's see here. This is what it did. It has our resource group here that's going to be created, but then everything below it is in a deployments resource. So this is where the nested stuff comes into play, and this is where it gets very busy looking. So we have our parameters that we're passing in with our values. Of course, these can be overridden. And then we have our template. But in this case, we're not necessarily linking to a file template. Here during our compilation, it just added it here. So we have our deployments, we have our template section, we have our parameters, and then we have our resources.
Got it.
So this is 91 lines compared to 15 in addition to the stuff that we have here.
Yeah. Well, and it's not even just the lines, but I think that it's the readability, it's the IntelliSense, and the tips and the hints and things like that really make it, there's a lot of value here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, right now we're running this locally, but we're never really going to be deploying resources from our local machine. We're going to do it in an automated pipeline. And that's kind of the way that, we should do it. When you're running a pipeline, you want to make sure that your resources exist first and that they're configured the way you want them to be configured. So you can run ARM templates before you actually deploy the code. Because with an ARM template, if the resource exists and it's already configured to the way that the ARM template wants it to be, it's not going to do anything to it. So it's idempotent. It won't fail. And that's great. So we want to look at this in a pipeline. Anyone interested in looking at it in a pipeline?
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm definitely interested in that. Hey, while you're getting that ready,
yeah.
Should we do a little commercial, Chris?
Yeah.
I always like to take a little break and say, if you're watching us, and we appreciate it, and we're not done. We're going to come back to more content, right? But if you're watching us now, thank you for being here. We hope you hit the like and the subscribe and all the different things, depending on the platform you're on, right? What platforms are we on? We're on
Twitch and YouTube, right? You can watch us live on Twitch and live on YouTube during the show. And then we have every replay. Every replay is on YouTube.
The library's getting big, I think, right? We've got a lot of content out there on YouTube. And I think I see it on the featured chat, right? You can find it at video.thedevtalkshow.com, or you can go to youtube.com/thedevtalkshow. We've got options for you, right?
Yeah.
And what else do we like to tell people, Chris? I don't know.
Well, there's a meetup site and the meetup site is where, when we get a schedule going, sometimes we're a few weeks out, sometimes we're maybe trying to figure out what we're doing next Wednesday, but we do announce the future schedule there. And if you just follow us on Twitter at the same time, you'll see a tweet that we're going live or what's coming up this week. But the key is that we are here live Wednesday nights at 8:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern.
Yeah, we're pretty consistent with that. We may start a minute or two late, right? But we've been pretty consistent with our Wednesday night shows. We've been having a good time with that. And I'm looking at the screen now. Well, you're not sharing this, but Brian is deleting stuff from his thing like a madman here. I don't know what he's sneaking something in here. What are you up to there, Brian?
I'm going to try to get back to what I had before without having to type it all over again.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
There's one thing I want to show you is the decompile before we even show anything else.
Oh yeah,
okay.
That's cool.
Yeah. While he's doing that, if you're watching on YouTube in the future and you like this content, hit the the little thumbs up. And, even if you don't like it and you hit the thumbs down, then I guess we know what people want to watch and what they don't. But everybody's going to hit thumbs up on this one because it's... Oh, yeah. I'm not able to write ARM templates. I'm usually using the portal to make it build an ARM template. And then I kind of cross my fingers that I can reuse that thing. And I've run into cases where I just don't know how to create a parameter correctly. So I'm just stuck. And I'm really thinking, hey, what I liked about this is I only concentrated on what I cared about, and then the resource, the ARM template had everything that I needed. All the things I didn't even know I needed were just kind of thrown in there. So that's really helpful.
Yeah, and I was saying to people at work, this week, I was kind of saying, hey, you guys might want to tune into the show. We do a fair amount of work with ARM templates, and we find it kind of painful. I mean, it's just a fact. We do. And I was telling people, you want to tune in for this one because I think this is going to make things, a lot easier for us. And as I'm watching this, I'm thinking about it. And there's a question in the chat, which we might have touched upon right in the beginning, but let's just reiterate that, where PA Galvin on YouTube says, is Bicep stable production ready? Brian?
Yes, it is. Just last week or the week before, it became production ready.
So, and another thing I guess we could say, and maybe you're going to talk, this is free, right? This is not a paid product.
No, it's not a paid product. It's free. The only thing you pay for are the resources it creates.
Right. So I assume now that it's officially going to be some sort of long-term support. When it's called Project Bicep, I don't know. I've been around for other project things where they might go away, right? But this is I assume going to be maintained for a while, and it have a life cycle. You said it's covered by support and things like that.
Yeah.
So I guess the question I'm wondering, I'll just ask you this before you get to the other stuff. Is there any reason why we wouldn't just start using this in a real environment?
Not unless you are facing one of the limitations, and really the only limitation that is listed on the website that I could have an issue with because I have used it before.
I recall on the slide you said copy doesn't work, and copy is actually a kind of important feature, right?
Yeah, that's what I was exactly going to talk about. I don't use it a lot, but I have used it. Let's see, limitations, where are they? So before last week, this was a longer list. So it is definitely getting smaller. So, you don't have this. And
so copy is when you want to do a collection. You want to say, I want to create 5 websites, right? Am I correct about that? And you give it some parameters and it loops through them. Is that copy?
It could be used for a number of different things. I can't really remember what I have used it for.
Okay.
But it's in some things that you want to do, you have to use a copy because that's just what the syntax is requiring.
Okay.
In order to set a parameter or set something on a resource,
right.
Based on what type of values you need to pass in. So I can't remember exactly, but I have used it, and I wouldn't have been able to do what I wanted to do without using it.
Right.
So it is needed. But like I said, I've only used that once or twice in the years I've been doing this, so it's not one of the things that I've come across very often. And also this loop thing and conditions.
Right.
That's something
I guess
that could stop you.
those are like issue numbers, I think, right there,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
60.
Uh-huh.
So clearly it's in the pipeline. Like they're working on that, is what
Yep.
it seems like.
Right. This one I don't really care about because it's just it's just a syntax convenience. So it's not taking features away that you might need. You just can't do single line objects and arrays right now. But it's all coming.
Yeah.
So it definitely is going to be in full parity. Hopefully in the next one. I kind of thought that it would be this limitation with the copy would be solved with the production version, but maybe it will come out in the next one.
Maybe when they go to 1.0.
Ooh. That could take years.
Yeah, they're only at 4 or 3. What is it?
Yeah, I know.
All right, so what are you doing next now?
So the thing that I want to do next is we have, what I did was I took the one that I wrote originally, and I took the JSON file that it produced, and I copied it in a different directory. So what I'm going to show is the decompile, how you could take your existing ARM templates and decompile them into Bicep files. So it's pretty easy. So you do Bicep decompile, and then you just have to tell it what the name of the JSON file is.
You're in the right root there, right folder there now?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I went up to the IAC
I see.
location. Just hope I spelled everything right. Decompile looks right. Okay. So what this just did was it created this Bicep file.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what it looks like, very, very similar to what we did. So this is the Bicep version of this.
Pretty darn similar. That looks
I think it's exactly looks
Yeah,
like it,
I think
actually. So, well, yeah, I plan on doing this with a lot of the ARM templates that I've written for customers, because I think the fact that Bicep can be compiled during a build stage and you can get feedback through IntelliSense and all that, it's the way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things, we didn't really talk too much about, except the name of your project is IAC, right? Infrastructure as Code is what I assume that stands for.
Yep.
And there might be people that are watching that don't really get on the value. I'm going to pose this question, which I think we know the answer to, but maybe for the audience, Brian, why wouldn't I want to just go ahead and create these things manually in the Azure portal? That's easy to do, right?
It is, but it also gives the ability to make mistakes. And it takes time to do it manually, especially if you have things that are complex, like private endpoints, network firewall rules, all those things. You need to set up through the portal, where if you write it once, it might take a little while to write it once, but then it's repeatable. You don't have to go through it again. It's almost instantaneous now, since you can compile it and deploy it as an ARM template. It gives you the consistency that you know that what you wrote is going to be deployed in exactly the way you want it to be deployed, so you get that consistency. Takes the human element out of it. And it also does save time, because believe me, you get lots and lots of requests for resources in Azure. And if you have to go in and do all these things manually all the time, it's time prohibitive, really. This is much more efficient.
I also love that you can do code reviews on your infrastructure. People can look at it and say, wait, that's not you're not using the right SKU. I mean, you might parameterize those and use variables, but you know what I mean? You can have people look at this and have code reviews too, which I think is just such a great benefit of infrastructure as code. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, and it falls right into the whole development process. So it's basically, that's the thing with DevOps is you want, you have the developers and you have operations. You want them to be speaking the same language. So having a development approach, yes, you have operations people that don't come from a development background, so they might need to, learn some of the processes that you would go through with development. But then again, you have developers that don't know anything about infrastructure, and this makes it easier for developers to create this stuff in a way that the developer would feel comfortable doing.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's cool.
All right, so going back to what we were talking about as far as automation and pipelines, I think we have 15 minutes left. So I created my IAC, a pipeline, and basically what this has in it are variables. A variable group where I'm putting all of my values that are needed for creating the infrastructure. And down here within our build stage, there is now a Bicep task in the marketplace for Azure Pipelines.
Okay.
Which I don't think it was there 2 weeks ago. So I was really crossing my fingers that they would create this for Azure Pipelines, because there's already one in GitHub with actions. There's already a built-in action for installing and compiling Bicep. So now you can do the same thing within Azure Pipelines.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the first tasks you have is Bicep install. So you could have a on-premises build machine where you have Bicep already pre-installed and the path variables set. So all you would have to do is run a command and it would work. But in a Microsoft hosted build setup, which lots of people love, you have to install it, and it has to configure with the paths. So that's what this does, this step right here. Mm-hmm. And then you have the ability to build it. So it's a matter of just specifying the source file, and you have, this says right here, this says single, but you can actually have directory and just point to a directory of Bicep files, and it will create all of them, so you don't have to specify individual names for it. But in our case, we're just using one. So then it's going to copy it to the JSON file. So we have here that we're going to copy it to our artifacts staging directory, so it is an artifact. And then in our deploy stage, we're just using an Azure Resource Management deployment task because it's an ARM template that we're deploying, so none of this changes. We just
so you're using the multi-stage pipeline here, by the way, which I've dabbled in a little bit, but I think I still have things where I'm doing the old pipelines and releases separately. Mm-hmm. But so that's pretty cool, and this is a good use case, a good example for that, I think, as well.
Yeah, I only use this now. I actually started using this probably 2 years ago when I was on a project, and I was working with a lot of open source people, and they were used to other CI/CD platforms, and they did not like, for whatever reason, the classic designer. They thought it was too structured, too, I don't know, not fragile, but too rigid, I guess. And then I introduced them to this, and they loved it. This is exactly what they wanted, because they're developers, and this is kind of like development right here. Mm-hmm. So if we go and run this, let me just show you.
So this is going to take the Bicep file. It's going to transpile it. I mean, you can call it compile, whatever, but it's probably, it's
going to build
turn it into an ARM JSON. Mm-hmm. Right there, yep. And then it's going to execute it down below.
In the deploy stage, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly what it's going to do. So if
you're not deploying any actual code with this. Like, we're not actually creating the functional website. This is just, setting it up. It's the infrastructure.
But you can imagine this would just be, 2 steps in a build that would be compiling code, running unit tests, running E2E tests, doing audits and all that kind of stuff that you would do with a regular type of application. So this would just be built into the build stage. You're compiling, and you would just output it to different directories. So then when you do the deploy stage here, one of the first steps you would do is deploy the infrastructure, and then down here, this is where you would do the code deployments after it. Because your infrastructure is going to be there now.
Right.
And it's going to be configured the way you want it to be. Now, some people wouldn't like this to be part of the pipeline doing this, and that's okay. But for consistency's sake, I liked having the ARM template run before you do a code deployment, just to make sure it's exactly the way you want it to be. That nobody went in there and changed it. If somebody
I like that. And let me tell you, how many times have we all run into problems where someone goes and manually fixes something that they shouldn't be, right? And when you rerun the deployment and it resets things back, I always tell people, don't make changes manually, right? You got to put your changes into the template, or in this case, into the Bicep stuff.
Bicep file, and that's where you can do your pull requests and have people do code reviews of it.
Yeah.
Because you know what it's going to create. So I'm going to run this.
Yeah.
And while this is running, it's going to deploy it to this resource group. And there's nothing in there right now. At least I hope not. All right, so there's nothing in there. Let's go take a look at this. It's pretty fast to run the Bicep stuff, the install and the build. And I did look today. I did not see in the newest Microsoft hosted build agents Bicep being installed on them yet. So maybe they'll be able to install it, and we wouldn't have to do the install step in the future.
Okay.
All right, so it actually did what we wanted to do. We built it, and it didn't fail. Copied that one JSON file to our artifacts, and it's now deploying.
Now this could take a while, right? Because it's actually deploying an Azure resource.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
it
sometimes
won't take,
these things.
Yeah, it won't take too long for us because it's just an app service plan. But right, I mean, if you try to install or create APIM, for example, using an ARM template, that could be like a 30-minute operation the first time you do it. It's forever.
Yeah, but that is what it is, right? Like some people, sometimes I find it frustrating when I'll run these things and I'm like, oh God, it's so slow. Then I stop and think about what it's really doing under the covers, and I'm like, I'm complaining that it's taking 30 seconds, it's doing a lot. Look, it's done already, right?
It's done already.
It's pretty good.
And we can see here the artifact, which is our JSON file. So if we go back here and refresh, hopefully it will be there. Oh, look at that. So we have our app service and our app service plan.
As promised, right?
As promised. And it's just so cool that we can treat it like we treat a source code by compiling it and building it in a build stage.
Yeah, I like that was part of the pipeline, because earlier, we were building the ARM template just, on your machine, but now it's like, hey, I want to treat this as my actual code, so we've got a way to do that.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, it's super simple.
I was wondering. Go ahead, Brian. I'm sorry.
I was just going to show GitHub how it works in action.
So, also, can you do me a favor and I just want you to clarify something. In case people are watching, if you go back to your source code, I noticed you had a folder in here called Terraform. Mm-hmm. And I'm guessing that's just for some other purpose. Like, I don't want people to think Terraform is being used at all here, right? This is not a Terraform product. Right?
This is my IAC team project, so I have the demos that I've done. So I just put them all in the same repo.
Sure.
But nope, this is not being used. It's just this that's being used right here. And of course, there's source files in here and all that kind of stuff, parts unlimited, but
Huh.
Wanted to keep it focused on the Bicep stuff.
Yeah, totally. Open Window 365 says, good timing. I used ARM templates for APIM yesterday. I wonder how long it took for Open Window to run that.
Especially if you wanted to set up a certificate with.
So now you're showing us
Actions.
what? Yeah,
So,
actions. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is in GitHub Actions. I think everybody probably knows that Microsoft bought GitHub a couple of years ago for a lot of money. So a lot of Microsoft's efforts are now going into GitHub and not so much Azure pipelines. So basically the product team, a lot of the product team for Azure DevOps has moved over to GitHub. And it doesn't mean that Azure DevOps is going anywhere. It's still growing. There's still investment in it. All of Microsoft is still on Azure DevOps. And there still is not feature parity between GitHub and Azure DevOps, but it will get there. So if you are working with Azure DevOps, don't worry about it. It's going to be around for at least 10 to 20 more years. It's just that maybe some of the feature development will slow down from what it used to, because a lot of the effort is now going into GitHub. And GitHub has some great stuff like security scanning and inner source capabilities. But anyway, going back to our actions are a YAML file. And we can see here that we have steps here, the checkout step, and we have this built-in action that is for Bicep. So it does exactly the same thing that we were doing in Azure pipelines. It will create the JSON file from the Bicep file. So we only have about 3 minutes left. Well, let me see if I can run this.
We're not too strict on time. We're not going to cut you off on the seconds, so don't worry about that.
All right, let's see what happens here.
You mean we don't start the off-stage music, because it's gone too long?
Yeah, we have a little Benny Hill guy running around. Remember Benny Hill? Are you guys
Oh, wow.
old? Remember Benny Hill?
Yeah.
That little old guy ran around, and I don't know.
With that great music.
Made me think of that. Hey, while this is running, Brian, I don't know if this is going to take a minute. While this is running, you got some experience with Terraform. I mean, can you do a little compare and contrast, like pros and cons, one versus the other? Putting you on the spot here.
No, it's fine. Terraform is great. I mean, don't get me wrong. I do like it. The only thing I don't like about it is state file dependency, because I've gotten burned by it. And it kind of scares me. Yes, you can recreate a state file, but if it becomes corrupt, you either have to delete all your resources in Azure and start from scratch, or you have to create, you have to write a script that will recreate your state file. But that's not fun either, because you have to pass in the resource ID to the specific resource that you're going to, and you have to do that with every single environment because the resource IDs would be different. So the state file corruption bothers me because I've been in bad situations with it. But other than that, Terraform's great. Now, there are some gaps with Terraform that are quickly closing. It doesn't support everything that ARM Templates and Bicep supports. But a lot of those are closing because Microsoft is really putting in a lot of effort into Terraform also.
Oh, that's interesting that they're putting effort into Terraform. Okay. Now, I would say, I guess, a benefit of Terraform is that it's cross-cloud or something, whatever you want to call that, right? Like you can deploy resources to
AWS. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
To other, yes.
From what I read,
you still have to write it. You still have to write a different Terraform script.
Oh, you do?
Oh, yeah.
No, I didn't. Yeah. Oh, okay. I thought it was a little bit more generic. Like, I need a website, and it knows that in AWS, a website is called such and such, and in Azure, a website is called something else. That's not the case then.
No. You have to use the Azure provider for Azure, and you have resources that are specific to Azure. AWS does not have the same resources. They may do the same thing, but they're not the same types of resources. They're created differently. So you have to rewrite everything. But Terraform is cross-platform compatible, where Bicep is just for Azure.
Right. And I think I was reading where they said that it's interesting. You make a good point that, Microsoft's putting effort into Terraform, but I guess the assumption was, and this could be an assumption, that when a new feature comes out in Azure and in ARM, it's going to be more likely to be quicker into Bicep. Like that, they're going to really keep it tight, right?
Yeah.
Whereas there might be some delay with Terraform. Again, I'm not saying it's a bad product. It's been around a long time. I've heard great things about it, but it seems like if you're a Microsoft shop, and we're a Microsoft shop, we're only on Azure, I should say. Well, this seems pretty straightforward,
Yeah. It is straightforward. It is pretty straightforward. And like I said, I like Terraform, but I think I like Bicep better.
All right.
Well, that state file corruption thing sounds dangerous, and I've heard about that before.
Yeah, it doesn't happen all the time, but the other thing is for automated pipelines, you need to have that state file somewhere, because if you're running it on a Microsoft hosted machine, where's that state file going to be? It's not on your local machine. It's not on the hosted machine. So you have to put the state file into a storage account. So there's a dependency on a storage account with the state files if you're going to run it in a pipeline.
Yeah.
Well, there's the endorsement. I like
Bicep
Bicep better. Yeah.
I do. Yeah,
Sorry.
I do.
No, I'm with you too, Chris. Sounds straightforward. So what happened with your
So it created this artifact.
Okay.
And if we go look at it, it is our JSON file.
Yay.
So let's see what it looks like. There it is. So it looks very similar.
Yep.
So yeah, so that's in Actions. And we're going to be moving more to GitHub as time goes on. So I really say that people should keep that in mind.
Right.
Start learning GitHub, because these actions are powerful. They're just not for CI/CD. They're for any type of workflow that you need. It's very powerful, and I think they are going to have environments here. They're going to have multi-stage capabilities. So they're still working on it, but it will be in full parity with Azure pipelines. Pretty soon, probably within the next 6 months, I would think.
Yeah, I think for like a company like mine, like I'm wondering, like, how do we get to, if we wanted to make the jump? I mean, we have, I don't know, we use, all kinds of stuff. We use Azure boards, we use Azure Git. Like it's pretty significant change.
Yeah.
To switch over to issues and things like that. So that's where things are a little tricky from my perspective.
Yeah,
but
you don't have to. You could
Right.
take a hybrid approach, and that's exactly what Microsoft recommends, where you store your code in GitHub, take advantage of all the code QL, security, scanning stuff, but you still use Azure pipelines. You still use Azure boards. You can even still use Azure artifacts and Azure test plans. And then slowly move things over, because a lot of people have a huge investment in Azure pipelines and DevOps and the boards and all that stuff. They're not going to just throw that all away and make a big jump over. So it's something that would happen over time.
Yeah, I'd like to hear about, I don't know if there's like a whole show here, but the security stuff that you touched upon is important stuff. I think you're talking about like code, like DevSecOps kind of stuff, I guess, right?
Yeah, shift left of the security stuff.
Yeah, so
to the point where you're getting feedback when you commit.
Yeah, how great is that? I mean, I would love to hear something about that. Do you have experience on all that stuff too?
Yeah, I do. I don't think I can do it in the next 2 minutes though, so maybe I'll come back at another time.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, maybe we'll have you come something like that. But dang, what do you think, Chris?
Yeah, look, this was cool. Like I said, I didn't know what to expect from Bicep. The only thing I knew is there was somebody saying, "Hey, let's build a more of a language instead of like having to remember the properties to put when and where. And I've struggled with ARM templates myself. So I really love that there's like VS Code extension support ready to go. There's a lot here that looks really interesting, because what I would like to think of this stuff more as code and less as what I'm really doing is here, Portal, figure it out and generate it for me, which is just I don't feel comfortable with that. I want to be able to kind of control it a little, or just at least understand what's going on.
Yeah, it's kludgy, using JSON for it. And JSON, I guess, is a DSL, but it's not one I want to be reading and writing.
Right.
Yeah.
So we are going to have a set of links for the show tonight. And, if you're watching us right now on Twitch, then I'm going to go ahead and paste that in. And we'll make sure that if you're watching in the future on YouTube, that it's going to be down below in the description. But that should expand out to a series of links. And they include, we talked a little about Tech Bash. We talked about where this repo is on GitHub. And I also went ahead and linked Brian's talk at Code Camp. Philly.net had a Code Camp a couple months ago. In that one, you talked about Terraform and ARM. So there's no Bicep in there. But, like we were saying at the beginning of the show, Brian has spent so much time both evangelizing and talking about infrastructure automation that I just feel like, we had the source on tonight, the person to talk to. So really, definitely appreciate it. Thank you very much, Brian.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me again. It's great. It's a lot of fun.
Well, the Real Japan's here. Says that's a great name. I assume the Real Japan is talking about Bicep, but unless the Real Japan is talking about Brian Minisi being a great name, which I think is a great name. He says Brian. Brian is a great name. Oh yeah. Real Japan's talking about you. We got Real Japan saying we've got the right person here. We've got Brian, big name in this space. I agree.
And by the way, that open source company that I was talking about before that didn't like the classic UI, they were in Japan. They were a Japanese company, and I actually got to go to Japan for a week during that project. So that was really neat.
Awesome! Wow, that was pre-COVID, obviously.
Yes, pre-COVID. Yeah.
So listen, Brian, we want to thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah.
And spending quite a bit of time with us, giving us your expertise. And Chris has shared a bunch of links, and people can check it out, follow up with and see some of the other stuff Brian has done. He's been a great resource for our Philly community and beyond, really, when it comes to this kind of content. CI/CD / DevOps / whatever you want to call it. Brian's been a great resource for us. So it's been a great show. Thanks to everybody in the audience who's been, putting in the chat. We always love to hear from you guys, and I hope you'll continue to be with us. I don't have anything to announce about next week's show topic, but you can be sure that if Wednesday night at 8:30, we will be here, and we will start tweeting soon about some content. We'll get that out to you. And we hope to see you soon. So thank you very much for Chris Gomez, who's working hard on the behind the scenes as well as this, and on our guest, Brian Minisi, and myself, Andy Schwam. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll see you next week on the Dev Talk Show.